Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UFS Liberty, watching another human colony ship turn away from the Kepler 442 system. The massive vessel slowly changed course while families inside prepared for another year of searching for a home that might never come. Jake clenched his fists as he watched the ship disappear into the black void of space. This was the 5th colony ship this month that had been denied entry into systems humanity had discovered first. Dr. Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge carrying a data tablet, filled with numbers that made Jake's stomach turn. She was the ship's expert on alien life, and had been tracking the Council's decisions for 3 years. Her face showed the same frustration that everyone felt these days. The Galactic Council had just approved another expansion request from the Zilani hegemony. They now controlled 67 star systems while humanity was still stuck with only 18. Lisa placed the tablet on the command table and pointed to the latest reports. The Valix Confederation had started mining operations in the Ross system last week. Humans had been the first to map those asteroids and catalog their mineral content. The survey data was still in human databases, but somehow the Council had declared it an open system after the Valix claimed they had historical mining rights dating back 200 years. Jake knew this was impossible because the Valix had only developed space. Travel 150 years. As the communication system buzzed with an incoming message from Earth. Ambassador Ryan Torres appeared on the main screen looking tired and defeated. He had been fighting diplomatic battles in the Council chambers for 7 years now. His hair had gone completely gray during that time. Behind him, Jake could see the Council building where humanity begged for scraps while other species divided up the galaxy like pieces of cake. Ryan delivered news that hit like a punch to the gut. The Council had suspended humanity's mining rights in the Kepler system. They called it a temporary administrative review, but everyone knew what that meant. The rare earth minerals from Kepler were the only valuable trade goods humanity controlled. Without those resources, human colonies would start running out of essential technology within 18 months. Medical equipment would fail. Life support systems would break down. Ships would be grounded. Jake watched Ryan explain how the Kronthak Empire had filed a complaint, claiming humans were disturbing ancient archaeological sites. The sites in question were empty rocks that had been surveyed by human teams for 5 years. Not a single artifact had ever been found, but the Council accepted the complaint anyway, and ordered all human operations to cease immediately. Appeals could be filed but would take minimum 3 years to process. Lisa pulled up more data showing how other species had grown while humanity stagnated. The hegemony added 12 new systems every month. Their population had doubled in the past decade. They controlled trade routes that connected half the galaxy. Meanwhile, human children were being born on overcrowded stations because there was nowhere else for them to go. Some human settlements had been reduced to rationing basic supplies while alien worlds prospered, using resources they had taken from systems humans discovered. The bridge crew listened in silence as Ryan continued his report. 3 more colony applications had been rejected this week. The Council claimed these systems needed environmental impact studies that would take 5 to 10 years to complete. Other species never seemed to need such studies. They just filed a claim and started building. But humans had to jump through endless bureaucratic hoops that led nowhere. Jake turned to his crew and saw faces filled with anger and hopelessness. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to exploring the galaxy and building a future for humanity. They had followed every rule and respected every regulation. They had tried to be model galactic citizens. All they got in return was contempt and systematic exclusion from opportunities that other species took for granted. Lisa showed Jake a map of Council space with human territory marked in blue. The blue patches looked like tiny islands scattered across an ocean controlled by others. Red zones showed hegemony space. Green marked Valix territory. Yellow indicated Kronthak systems. Together, these 3 powers controlled over 400 star systems. Humanity's 18 systems looked pathetic by comparison. It was clear the Council intended to keep things exactly this way. The final insult came when Ryan mentioned the latest Council regulation. Starting next month, all human ships would need special permits to travel through systems controlled by other species. The permits would cost credits that humanity could barely afford and would take weeks to process. This meant human traders and explorers would be trapped in their tiny corner of space, while aliens moved freely wherever they wanted. Jake had heard enough. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to every human ship and station in the sector. His voice was calm but carried the weight of 50 years of frustration. He told them about the suspended mining rights and the new travel restrictions. He explained how the Council was slowly strangling humanity while pretending to treat them fairly. Then he made an announcement that would change everything. From this moment forward, all human vessels would observe radio silence protocol. No more requests to the Council. No more diplomatic appeals. No more begging for permission to exist. Humanity would stop asking and start acting. They would find their own resources and claim their own territory. They would build their own future without waiting for alien approval. The galaxy wanted humans to stay quiet and grateful. Instead, they would become quiet and dangerous. Lisa looked at Jake with surprise and growing excitement. The bridge crew straightened in their chairs as they realized what this meant. Ryan's transmission cut out as Earth Command tried to understand what Jake had just announced. But there was no confusion in Jake's mind. Humanity had tried cooperation for decades and gotten nothing but contempt. Now it was time to try something different. The galaxy thought humans were weak and dependent. Soon they would learn how wrong they were about that. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison announced radio silence protocol, and the galaxy had started to notice something was different. Admiral Kate Phillips stood in the command center of the UFS Defiance, watching reports flow in from human ships scattered across dozens of star systems. None of these ships were sending status updates to Council monitoring stations anymore. None were filing flight plans or requesting permission to survey new areas. They simply went where they needed to go and did what needed to be done. Commander Alex Stone had taken his engineering team to a nebula that Council charts marked as navigationally hazardous. Other species avoided the area because their ships could not handle the electromagnetic interference and radiation levels. But human vessels were built differently. They were designed by people who understood that space was dangerous and that safety came from being tougher than the environment. Alex had found something amazing hidden in the swirling gases and cosmic dust. The nebula contained metals that were incredibly rare in normal space. The radiation that made it dangerous for other species had actually created perfect conditions for manufacturing advanced technology. Alex established a hidden shipyard deep inside the nebula, where human workers could build vessels without any alien oversight. Within 4 months, the facility was producing ships that were faster and stronger than anything humanity had built. Before that, Dr. Rachel Blake was working from a mobile research platform that jumped between systems the Council had dismissed as scientifically worthless. These systems contained phenomena that other species considered too dangerous or too difficult to study. But Rachel thrived on solving impossible problems. She discovered that quantum tunneling effects in these regions could be used to create communication networks that worked faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The breakthrough came when Rachel figured out how to send messages through quantum tunnels without using the Council's heavily monitored relay network. For the first time in decades, human colonies could coordinate their activities without alien governments listening to every word. Ships could share information about resources and threats without revealing their locations to potential enemies. The galaxy had always controlled humans by controlling their communications. Now that control was broken. Kate received reports from survey teams that had been quietly exploring systems between the spiral arms. These regions were marked on galactic charts as empty space with nothing worth investigating. But human explorers found asteroid fields rich with rare minerals and planets that could support life with minimal terraforming. Other species had ignored these areas because they required long, dangerous journeys through regions with no established infrastructure. Captain Ben Walker commanded a squadron of ships that were establishing supply caches and refueling stations and systems that other species considered too remote to be useful. His teams worked in shifts around the clock, building the foundation for human expansion into areas the Council had never bothered to claim. Each new station extended the range of human operations and reduced dependence on alien-controlled infrastructure. The Council started noticing changes in human behavior patterns. Ships that used to file detailed reports about their activities had gone completely silent. Trade vessels that once followed approved shipping routes were appearing in unexpected locations. Diplomatic requests that used to flood Council databases had stopped entirely. But when Council investigators arrived at human territories, they found only standard colonies operating, normally with nothing suspicious visible. Dr. Samuel Davis had been studying Council laws and regulations for years looking for loopholes and forgotten clauses that could benefit humanity. While other humans focused on technology and exploration, Sam dug through thousands of legal documents written in dozens of alien languages. He discovered that the Council's own rules contained many opportunities that no one had ever bothered to use because they seemed too complicated or risky. Sam found an old regulation that allowed any species to claim systems that remained unchallenged for more than one galactic year. The Council had written this rule to prevent disputes between major powers, but never expected smaller species to use it systematically. Human survey teams began visiting remote systems and filing claims using obscure databases that other species had forgotten existed. Each claim was perfectly legal, but filed in ways that avoided immediate attention. Kate watched as human territory slowly expanded through legal maneuvering rather than military conquest. Ships would survey a system and establish a small research outpost. The outpost would be registered with the appropriate Council database using regulations that required no immediate review. After the required waiting period, the system would automatically become human territory, unless another species filed a counterclaim. Most species never bothered to monitor these obscure legal processes. The hegemony and other major powers were too busy fighting over valuable systems near the galactic core to pay attention to human activities in remote regions. They assumed humans were withdrawing from galactic affairs and becoming less of a factor in interstellar politics. This was exactly what Kate and the other human leaders wanted them to think. While aliens focused on their traditional rivalries, humans were quietly building something entirely new. Alex reported that his hidden shipyard had completed its first batch of vessels designed specifically for long-range operations in dangerous space. These ships could travel farther and faster than traditional human vessels, while carrying enough supplies to establish permanent outposts without external support. Each ship was also equipped with Rachel's new communication system, allowing instant coordination across vast distances. Kate realized that humanity was approaching a tipping point. The network of hidden bases and legal claims was becoming large enough to support major operations independent of Council oversight. Human colonies were no longer isolated settlements dependent on alien goodwill. They were becoming nodes in a growing civilization that spanned regions the galaxy had written off as worthless. Soon it would be impossible for the Council to ignore what humans had accomplished. When that day came, humanity would be ready to negotiate from a position of strength rather than weakness. 18 months after humans had begun their radio silence, the Galactic Council finally understood that something was seriously wrong. Admiral Zethkri of the Zilani hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship staring at sensor readings that made no sense, according to everything the Council knew about human capabilities. His fleet had come to investigate reports of unauthorized activity in what should have been empty space between spiral arms. The sensors showed massive industrial complexes spread across 3-star systems that Council charts had marked as barren and worthless. Manufacturing stations the size of small moons were producing ships and equipment at rates that rivaled the output of entire hegemony sectors. Agricultural habitats were growing food for populations that should not have existed in these remote regions. Defensive platforms surrounded each installation with enough firepower to challenge a battle fleet. Captain Ben Walker was the first human to break radio silence in over a year, when Zethkri's fleet approached the outermost human facility. His ship UFS Sovereign appeared on hegemony sensors without any warning, as if it had materialized from empty space. Ben transmitted a message that was polite but carried an unmistakable warning. He informed the hegemony fleet that they were approaching sovereign human territory and should state their business immediately. Zethkri demanded to know how humans had established such extensive operations without Council approval. Ben's response was calm and precise. He explained that all human activities in the region were completely legal under Council Regulation 847C subsection 12, which allowed any species to claim systems that remained unchallenged for more than one galactic year. He suggested that Zethkri review the appropriate legal databases if he had questions about human territorial rights. The hegemony admiral was forced to withdraw, while his legal experts verified Ben's claims. What they discovered sent shockwaves through Council headquarters. Humans had filed territorial claims on 47 star systems using legal procedures that were technically correct, but had been buried so deep in Council bureaucracy that no one paid attention to them. Every claim had been properly registered and had passed the required waiting periods without challenge. Dr. Samuel Davis arrived at Council headquarters 3 days later as humanity's new chief legal representative. He carried data tablets containing copies of every regulation humans had used and every claim they had filed. Sam explained to shocked council members that humanity had spent 2 years studying galactic law more thoroughly than anyone had done in centuries. They had found dozens of opportunities that other species considered too risky or complicated to pursue. The council discovered that while they thought humans were withdrawing from galactic affairs, humanity had actually been expanding faster than any species in recorded history. The systems humans claimed contained resources worth more than the entire annual output of hegemony space. Rare earth minerals that the council had denied to humans were abundant in territories they now controlled legally. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted without anyone noticing. News of human expansion spread through council space, causing panic among the major powers. The Valix Confederation discovered that asteroids they had been planning to claim were already under human control through legal filings made months earlier. The Kronthak Empire found human research stations on worlds they considered part of their sphere of influence. Every attempt to challenge human claims failed because the paperwork was perfect, and the legal procedures had been followed exactly. Admiral Kate Phillips revealed the full scope of human achievements during a broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. She stood in the command center of a space station that had not existed on any council chart 6 months earlier. Behind her, massive viewports showed construction teams building ships using technologies that seemed decades ahead of anything other species possessed. Human civilization had not just expanded, it had evolved. Kate explained that humans had taken advantage of the galaxy's tendency to dismiss them as primitive and unimportant. While other species fought over traditional territories, humans had claimed regions that everyone else considered worthless, systems between spiral arms that required dangerous journeys, nebulae that interfered with alien ship systems, asteroid fields in areas with unstable gravity. Humans had turned these challenges into advantages. The technology demonstrations that followed Kate's announcement shocked even human allies. Ships emerged from what appeared to be empty space using stealth systems that made them invisible to council sensors. Communication networks transmitted data across galactic distances without using any known relay stations. Manufacturing processes created materials that were stronger and lighter than anything in galactic markets. Humanity had not just caught up with other species, they had surpassed them. Commander Alex Stone demonstrated the capabilities of ships built in his hidden shipyard. The vessels moved with speed and agility that defied council understanding of physics. Their weapons could punch through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Their defenses could withstand attacks from entire squadrons. Most importantly, they were designed and built entirely by humans using resources from human-controlled territory. Dr. Rachel Blake showed how human communication networks had created coordination capabilities that gave them massive tactical advantages. Human fleets could respond to threats faster than their enemies could organize attacks. Information flowed between human territories in real time, allowing instant coordination across vast distances. The galaxy had always controlled humanity by limiting their communications, but those limitations no longer existed. The revelation that humans had outplayed the galaxy at its own game sent the council into emergency session. Species that had spent decades treating humanity as a minor nuisance now faced a civilization that controlled strategic resources and possessed technology they could not match. The primitive humans who used to beg for scraps had become a power that could dictate terms to anyone who threatened them. The galaxy would never be the same again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the discovery of human expansion, and the chamber buzzed with angry voices from species that had never expected to feel threatened by humanity. Representatives from the Zilani hegemony demanded immediate action to reverse what they called illegal human aggression. The Valix Confederation wanted economic sanctions that would force humans back into their assigned territories. The Kronthak Empire had already begun mobilizing battle fleets. General Nicole Hayes entered the council chamber as humanity's first official representative in 2 years. She wore the uniform of Earth Defense Command and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had 47 star systems backing her words. The aliens who had grown used to dismissing human diplomats found themselves facing a woman who looked like she had come to dictate. terms rather than beg for mercy. Nicole's opening statement was simple but carried the weight of the most rapid expansion in galactic history. She explained that humanity had tried cooperation and following council regulations for 50 years. They had accepted smaller territories and fewer resources while watching other species prosper. They had been patient and respectful and grateful for whatever scraps the galaxy chose to give them. That patience had now reached its limit. The hegemony representative interrupted Nicole, demanding that humans immediately withdraw from systems they had claimed illegally. Nicole's response was delivered in a tone that made every alien in the chamber understand that humanity was no longer asking for permission. She pointed out that every human claim had been filed using proper council procedures, and that all waiting periods had been observed exactly as galactic law required. If the council wanted to challenge human rights, they would need to do so in galactic courts. The Valix representative threatened to cut off all trade with human territories, believing this would force humanity to surrender. Nicole smiled and explained that humans no longer needed alien trade networks. The systems they controlled produced everything required for their civilization to prosper. Rare earth minerals that other species desperately needed were abundant in human space. If anyone wanted to impose economic sanctions, they should consider who would suffer more from the loss of trade. Admiral Peter Morgan appeared on the chamber's communication screens from his flagship UFS Retribution. Behind him stretched a fleet of human vessels that represented technology no one in the council had seen before. Peter's message was delivered with military precision and left no room for misunderstanding. Any act of aggression against human territory would be considered an act of war against a sovereign galactic power. Humanity was prepared to defend itself with whatever force necessary. The Kronthak Empire's war chief stood and declared that his fleets were already moving toward human space. He claimed that humans had stolen territory that rightfully belonged to older and more established species. Peter's response came immediately. Human defensive platforms were already tracking Kronthak ships and would open fire if they entered human territory without permission. The war chief would discover that human defenses were considerably more advanced than his intelligence services believed. Dr. Angela Ross joined the transmission from a research facility that demonstrated human technological achievements during the silence period. She showed weapons that could destroy asteroids with single shots and shields that could deflect attacks from entire fleets, manufacturing systems that could build warships faster than any other species could produce fighters, communication networks that allowed instant coordination across galactic distances. Humanity had not just expanded, they had revolutionized warfare itself. The council chamber fell silent as representatives realized that threatening humanity might not be as simple as they had assumed. The species that had dismissed humans as primitive were looking at technology that seemed generations ahead of their own capabilities. Ships that moved faster than anything in galactic navies, weapons that could penetrate defenses that were supposed to be impenetrable, defenses that could stop attacks from forces that had conquered entire sectors. Nicole stood and addressed the council with words that would be remembered for centuries. She explained that humanity had learned important lessons during their decades of marginalization. They had learned that asking for fair treatment led to exploitation. They had learned that following rules designed to keep them weak led to stagnation. They had learned that the galaxy respected strength and treated weakness with contempt. Humanity would never again allow itself to be weak. The smaller species in the council watched this confrontation with growing excitement. For centuries, they had been forced to accept whatever scraps the major powers allowed them. They had seen their own expansion requests denied while established species grabbed the best territories. But humanity had found a way to challenge the system and win. If humans could rise from the bottom to become a major power, then perhaps other species could do the same. The session ended, with the council facing a crisis that threatened to destroy the power structure that had controlled the galaxy for millennia. Humanity was no longer a minor species that could be ignored or bullied into submission. They controlled resources that other species needed. They possessed technology that other species feared. They had legal claims that other species could not challenge. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that the galaxy's established order was not as stable as everyone believed. Nicole left the council chamber knowing that the galaxy would never again treat humanity as a second-class species. The major powers could choose cooperation or conflict, but they could no longer choose to ignore human interests. The age of human patience was over. The age of human strength had begun. Other species would have to decide whether they wanted humanity as an ally or as an enemy. But they would never again have the option of treating humans as subjects. Peter Morgan's fleet remained on high alert as Kronthak forces approached human space. His ships were ready to demonstrate that human warnings were not empty threats. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. The Council had pushed humanity too far, and now they would face the consequences of that mistake. 3 years after Jake Morrison first announced Radio Silence Protocol, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Admiral Morrison now sat across from Council representatives in negotiations that would have been impossible when humanity was still begging for scraps. The conference table where humans once pleaded for basic rights had become a place where they dictated terms as equals to species that had once dismissed them as primitives. The Kronthak Empire had learned the hard way that human defensive systems were not theoretical demonstrations. Their fleet had approached human territory expecting to face ships and stations built with inferior technology. Instead, they encountered defensive platforms that tracked their movements from distances that should have been impossible, and weapons that could destroy entire squadrons with single volleys. The brief conflict lasted 6 hours and ended with Kronthak forces retreating in confusion. Dr. Lisa Carter now led joint research projects with scientists from 12 different civilizations. The dangerous systems that the Council had written off as worthless became humanity's greatest discoveries, yielding new technologies that benefited every species willing to work with humans. Nebulae that interfered with alien sensors provided materials for advanced manufacturing. Unstable gravity fields that other species avoided became sources of unlimited clean energy. The younger species in the galaxy watched humanity's rise with excitement and hope, rather than fear. They had spent centuries accepting that galactic politics would always be dominated by the same ancient powers that controlled the best territories and resources. But humanity had proven that newcomers could challenge established orders and win. If humans could rise from 18-star systems to become a major power, then perhaps others could follow the same path. Captain Ryan Torres had returned to diplomatic service, but now represented a civilization that other species courted rather than ignored. Trade delegations that once dismissed human proposals now competed for access to human-controlled resources. Territories that humans had been denied for decades were suddenly available through negotiation and mutual benefit agreements. The galaxy had discovered that treating humanity fairly was more profitable than exploitation. Commander Alex Stone's shipyards had expanded beyond the original Nebula facility to become a network of manufacturing centers that produced vessels for human allies as well as human forces. Species that had once looked down on human technology now studied human designs and begged for access to human manufacturing techniques. The ships emerging from human yards were setting new standards for speed, durability, and combat effectiveness throughout the galaxy. The Valix Confederation had attempted to maintain their economic blockade against human territories for 8 months before admitting defeat. Human-controlled systems produced everything the Confederation needed, while Confederation territories lacked access to the rare minerals that made human technology possible. The blockade had hurt the Confederation more than it hurt humanity and was quietly abandoned when Valix leaders realized they were destroying their own economy. Dr. Rachel Blake's communication networks had revolutionized not just human coordination but galactic commerce and diplomacy. Species that adopted human communication technology found that they could respond to crises faster and coordinate complex operations across vast distances. The Council's old relay system seemed primitive compared to quantum tunneling networks that transmitted information instantly across the galaxy, without any possibility of interception. The most significant change was not military or economic, but philosophical. Humanity's example had inspired other marginalized species to question the Council's authority and demand equal representation. The rigid hierarchy that had kept certain races in subordinate positions for centuries began cracking as younger civilizations organized resistance to discriminatory policies. The colonial independence movement grew from a human initiative into a galaxy-wide coalition. General Nicole Hayes established the first multi-species military academy, where officers from dozens of civilizations learned tactics and strategies that emphasized cooperation over domination. Students studied human innovations in warfare and diplomacy, alongside traditional galactic military doctrine. The Academy produced graduates who understood that strength came from unity and mutual respect, rather than exploitation and fear. Admiral Kate Phillips stood on the observation deck of Earth Station, one watching human ships depart for missions across the galaxy. These vessels no longer traveled as supplicants seeking permission, but as representatives of a civilization that had earned its place among the stars through determination and ingenuity. Some ships carried trade goods to new markets. Others transported scientists to joint research projects. Many escorted colony ships filled with families seeking new homes among the stars. The Zilani hegemony had been forced to accept that the galaxy now contained 4 major powers instead of 3. Their attempts to maintain exclusive control over the most valuable trade routes had failed when human territories provided alternative paths that were faster and safer. Hegemony merchants who had once dictated terms to smaller species now competed on equal footing with human traders who offered better prices and more reliable service. Dr. Samuel Davis had been appointed as the first director of Galactic Legal Affairs, a position created specifically to help smaller species navigate the complex regulations that had once been used to exploit them. His office provided free legal assistance to any civilization seeking to claim new territories or challenge discriminatory council policies. The legal precedents established by human expansion became templates that other species used to achieve their own goals. The final scene of humanity's transformation played out in classrooms, aboard space stations where children from dozens of different species learned together about cooperation, innovation, and the courage to stand up for what was right. Human teachers worked alongside alien educators to prepare the next generation for a galaxy where opportunity was earned through merit rather than inherited through ancient privilege. These children would grow up in a universe where any species could rise to greatness if they were willing to work for it. Jake Morrison's decision to end humanity's patience had created a galaxy where patience was no longer required. Species that worked hard and played fairly could expect fair treatment in return. Those that relied on exploitation and intimidation found themselves increasingly isolated as the rest of the galaxy moved toward cooperation and mutual benefit. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force but had transformed it through example. The silent warning had been heard and the message was clear. In this new galaxy, strength was earned and respect was mutual, and no species would ever again be forced to accept less than they deserved simply because others deemed them inferior.